Hey there, friends, and welcome back to The Architect of Self. If you've ever felt like your life looks fine on the outside but feels off on the inside, this episode's for you. Because that gap between who you pretend to be and who you really are is the root of your anxiety, self-doubt, and burnout you can't shake. I'm going to show you why the gap exists, how it hijacks your mind, and what it takes to close it. Stick around. I'm Carl. Okay, I want you to think about the moments when no one's watching you. Maybe it's sitting in your car before you walk inside work, or waiting alone in a line at Starbucks while grabbing a cup of coffee. Better yet, maybe when standing in the shower, replaying a conversation you wish you would have handled differently. Perhaps it's when you're sitting on the couch after a long week at work. TV just turned off, silence, just before heading to bed. Or any of those simple walks to the bathroom, kitchen, or even the mailbox with nothing but your thoughts. That's when the truth starts to leak into you, the self you can't hide from 100% of the time. Not the identity you keep trying to sell everyone, but that space between how you act around people and how you feel when you're alone. And it's what I call the gap. And it's that gap that keeps grinding you down, day by day, without your permission or even your control. It's the one you can't explain, but feel. Maybe you feel it in your jaw, your chest, maybe deep in your stomach. It's that sinking feeling when you can't avoid your truth and it hits you out of nowhere. It happens to all of us. It's not in the story you tell yourself to fall asleep. It is the story that's keeping you from sleeping. You know exactly who you are when the lights are off and you're alone with your thoughts. And you know exactly who you pretend to be when they flip back on and people are around. Today we're going to pull that gap into the light. You're going to want to avoid thinking about this as much as possible, but this is where the work's done. When we are uncomfortable and decide to sit with these feelings instead of avoiding or numbing them away. As always, this isn't therapy. I'm not your therapy buddy, and we're not going to trauma bond today. It's not polished, but it's raw. If you need help, get it from someone. Or call 988, the National Crisis Line. This episode does not constitute a therapeutic relationship between you and I. Welcome to the Architect of Self, and I'm Carl Gregory. I've spent decades in high-stakes, high-stress environments, and now I work as a trauma therapist and applied identity researcher. I hold a master's degree in counseling. I'm an advanced certified clinical trauma specialist, and I'm certified in neuropsychotherapy. I've completed all of my doctoral work for emergency management. I'm not saying that to flex. I'm saying it so you know this conversation is grounded in science, clinical experience, and real-world battle scars. Now, when I'm talking about self, I'm not talking about the version of you that other people get excited for. I'm not talking about your resume, your relationships, your feed, or your reflection in someone else's eyes. The self I'm talking about is the raw core. It's the unfiltered you left standing when the lights go out, when you're all alone, when you are facing struggles on an unpopulated island. No mask, no performance, no accolades. It's the voice in your head when you're driving in silence. It's the feeling in your chest when you screw up and nobody saw it. It's the shadow of who you know you are when nobody else is there to praise or condemn you. That's the self I'm talking about. And for most of us, it's the one we try to keep caged because we don't like the feelings we get when it's out. When you're out in the real world, answering emails, running errands, keeping your act together, one part of your brain is on. That's your task brain, the system that keeps the performance running. But the second you stop, sitting in your car, lying in bed, zoning out in the shower, another system kicks in. It's called the default mode network, or what we call DMN. Think of it like the operating system on a computer. You don't see it, but it's running in the background all of the time. holding the code of who you are, replaying old files, and looping your story. Here's a quick example to help you see what I'm talking about a little better. Imagine you see your boss or coworker driving home on the freeway and they don't see you yet. They're driving, blank stare, just themselves in their own head. Then they glance over, catch your eye, and almost instantly they change. Shoulders back, face resets, performance back on. That's the switch. Task brain is online. DMN shoved back into the dark. And at this point, you might be thinking to yourself, Carl, why do I need to understand this or even care about it? And I get it, but stay with me here for a moment. It will get clearer for you, and I will explain why it matters. Some of you listening right now might be struggling with depression, maybe even seasonal depression, and we know the seasons are changing as we listen to this. For most people, the fight between task brain and DMN only shows up in the quiet moments, like I previously mentioned, and most of us get. But for some of you, with depression, that switch is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. The default mode network keeps hammering away in the background, even while you're trying to perform in task brain. The mask is up, but the backstage is still running full volume. It's like trying to watch two different shows on your TV, but you only have one screen. They are fighting, flipping back and forth for screen time. That's why depression feels like exhaustion. It's like running two heavy programs on a computer at once, or flipping back and forth to two different shows, both draining energy, both chewing up resources. Eventually, the system lags, overheats, crashes. That's why you wake up tired before the day even begins. People without depression, they only wrestle with that clash in the car, in the shower, late at night. But if you're depressed, you're fighting it 24/7. There's no off switch. The switch is actually malfunctioning. And when the war never stops, of course you start looking for ways to numb it. Alcohol, scrolling, overwork, anything to try and shut down the background noise for just a little while. That's the raw neuroscience underneath the self. The DMN is your backstage operating system. The task brain is the performance system on stage. And depression? It's when the switch between them fails and you're stuck paying the price every second of every day. Sound familiar? Here's another one some of us are listening to right now that might be struggling with, and that's grief. If you're listening right now carrying grief, here's why it feels so brutal. Your background still holds the person who passed. The DMN replays their voice, their face, their laugh, like they're still alive in your inner world. But your task brain has to live in the cold reality where they no longer exist. That's why you have reached for the phone to text them. Then remembered you can't. Or you think you hear them walk through the door, and when you look over and they don't, the crash hits twice as hard. You see, one part of your brain is still with them. The other knows they're gone. And the war between these places is exhausting. Grief and the truth? The DMN doesn't rationalize loss. It doesn't update right away. It keeps running the old model where that person still exists in your story. And until the rest of your brain updates, you live in two realities at once. One where they're alive, one where they're gone. Think back to the switch. I'm going to come back to grief a little later in this episode because it really deserves more than a passing mention. But I want you to know, if you're feeling that tug of war, there's a reason. It's not you just having a hard time with grief. It's your brain trying to divide and make sense of two worlds at one time. So you're not broken. Your brain is literally trying to reconcile two different worlds, and that's why you're so damn tired. And that right there, that's what sets the architect of self apart. We don't just hand you coping skills and send you out the door. We dig deep into the systems you live with every day and give you the real explanation behind the why of your feelings. I guarantee some of you listening right now just had an aha moment. You've sat in therapy for years, and not one person who sat across from you broke it down like that. Nobody explained why you're tired all the time. Nobody connected the dots on why you really reach for that drink or that screen or that distraction. That's the difference here. We confront it, we name it, and we don't sugarcoat it. Let that all sink in as we visit our sponsors. Because after all, this show is free, and to keep it free, I need sponsors. So, for the next minute, you're going to listen to some sponsors. Bear with it, and we're going to dig into identity and the story you tell. Welcome back. Thanks for bearing with that. I appreciate it. Now, if the self is the raw signal, the core that leaks out when no one's watching, then identity is the story you're wrapping around it. It's who you tell yourself you are. It's the labels you carry. It's the roles you play. It's how you explain yourself to yourself. Identity is the story you edit and polish so you can hand it to the world, or hand it to yourself when you need to believe something stronger than that raw self you feel in the dark. And for most of us, that's a fragile, fragile item. Even your brain treats identity like a story. The medial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate, parts of the same default mode network we talked about, light up like a slot machine in Vegas when you're building your sense of self. They stitch together your memories, values, and beliefs into a narrative you can actually live in. But your brain loves validation. The reward system, the ventral stratum lights up when your identity gets confirmed by someone. Think of it like this. Someone tells you, you're such a great parent, or you're crushing it at work, and your brain drops dopamine like it just hit the lottery. But the flip side, when that story is challenged, the anterior cingulate cortex, the brain's conflict detector, goes off the charts. That's why criticism doesn't just sting, it burns. Your nervous system takes it as a threat to the story you've built around yourself. And if your whole identity is tied up in that story, it feels like life or death. The Stoics nailed this long before neuroscience. Epictetus said, "You are not what others say of you, but what you prove to yourself." And that, my friends, is a trap. If your identity depends on applause, likes, or titles, then you're building on shifting sand. One storm, one bad day, one divorce, one negative work critique, and your whole story collapses. Identity grounded in external praise collapses. Identity grounded in inner discipline endures. Let's look at it like this. If your identity is your job title and you get laid off, you don't just lose a paycheck, you lose your story. You don't know who you are without the uniform, the office, the authority, or the title. And that collapse is where anxiety and depression storm in. Think about the person you know who retired and really got in a low place. They wrapped their identity around their profession. Without it, in their inner world, they lost their identity when they retired. Or if your identity is wrapped up in being someone's spouse and the marriage explodes, you're not just dealing with heartbreak, you're dealing with identity death. You've been telling the world and yourself, this is who I am. And when it's gone, you feel like you're gone. Or maybe if your identity is tied up to your feed, the likes, the followers, the comments, then one bad post, one slump in attention, one algorithm shift, and suddenly you're spiraling. Why? Because the story you told yourself was that other people's eyes validated your identity. And when the eyes looked away, your story falls apart. So here's the catch. Identity isn't about what you tell the world. It's about what you prove to yourself when nobody's watching. The story you live in private is the only one that really should count. If your identity collapses the moment you lose a title, a relationship, or attention, then it wasn't truly your identity. It was just a performance. The question is, What's your story when all the props are stripped away? Let me share some personal thoughts about this. I've worn titles that looked permanent: leader, director, therapist, researcher, and many others. When some of those titles went away, I felt like I was being stripped with them, more than a special parking spot or corner office with a view. It rattled me, because what I didn't know then, I know now is, if your identity is the title, the role, the office, or the paycheck, when those things vanish, I vanished with them. But here's another thing I learned. Those things are all temporary. And when I saw them like that, and not part of my identity, things got way better. I needed to see them as only being borrowed. That office you sit in, it's not yours. It'll belong to the next person after you leave. The laptop with your name on it, issued, reclaimed, recycled. The titles, the uniforms, the responsibility, the jobs, they're all like desks at work. You get them for a while, and then you've got to hand them back. If you wrap your identity around those props, you're setting yourself up for collapse. Because I promise you, the day will come when your title is taken, the desk is cleared out, and the role is gone. If that's all you had, you'll be left standing at the empty space wondering who you are without them. I remember climbing once, 65 feet up a rock face, no crowd, no praise, just me, my belay partner, my breath, and the wall. My fingers were slipping, forearms burning, legs shaking, and lungs were on fire. I could hear my own thoughts screaming, "You're not going to make it. You're going to fall. It's too far." But in that moment, the only thing that I realized mattered to me wasn't the voice or the fear or the thought of the drop waiting for me if and when I missed the next hold. The only thing that mattered was the next move and trying to make it. I had to push past the panic, past the noise, past my stage performance, and just make the lunge. And when I did, when I trusted the movement, trusted the line, trusted myself, that's when it all hit me. Identity isn't in the title someone gives you or the performance you're giving. It's the standard you hold yourself to when no one can save you but you. That climb taught me the same thing as losing titles did. Your identity can't be borrowed, because everything borrowed will get taken back. Identity has to be built and aligned with self. It can only be built by you, and it has to be yours. Oh, and I fell. I missed the hold and did the big drop. And yeah, it sucked. Here's where most people get wrecked. The raw self they feel in the dark doesn't match the polished identity they sell in the light. The gap between the two, that's where the collapse happens. That's where depression, anxiety, grief, all of it digs in. So let's talk about it. Let's drag the gap into the open. This is where the wheels come off. The gap between the raw self you feel in private and the identity you perform in public. When the two don't line up, you don't just get tension, you get collapse, anxiety, depression, grief, self-sabotage, addiction. That's the price tag in the gap. Imagine this. Your self feels weak, tired, overwhelmed, but your identity, the story you are selling everyone, stays strong, disciplined, and confident. That mismatch, that's the conflict. And here's where addiction can creep in. When the war between self and identity gets so loud, you'll do anything to quiet it. A drink, a pill, a scroll, a hookup, anything that mutes the background fight for a while. But that's not healing. That's sedation. And neuroscience backs this up. The triple network model shows what's really happening under the hood. Your task brain, the central executive network, is trying to keep the performance running. Your background operating system, the DMN, is pulling you inward, replaying memories, whispering doubts, stoking regret. And the salience network is supposed to be acting like the switch, toggling you cleanly between task and self. But in depression, that switch is broken. The DMN doesn't shut down. It keeps hammering, even when you're supposed to be on task. So you're running two heavy programs at once, and the system overheats. That's why you wake up exhausted. That's why you can't focus. That's why your chest feels heavy, like it's carrying a weight you can't put down. Addiction steps in here as the counterfeit regulator. A shortcut to shut down one system temporarily when the natural switch is failing. And for a minute, it works. You feel quiet inside. The noise gets quieter, the spinning and spiraling decrease. The truth is, you're just pushing the silence button on a smoke detector while the fire keeps raging. Your coping mechanism isn't helping you. It's just a pause button, which is going to turn back off. Another version of the gap is suppression. Yourself is hurting, raw, wounded, grieving, but your identity says, I'm fine, I've got this. And so you stuff it down, you override the pain. Neuroscience shows suppression is expensive. Your prefrontal cortex has to clamp down on the amygdala and insula, the system screaming the truth from your body. That clamp burns energy. And when you repeat it day after day, it weakens. The regulation slips. Anxiety spikes. Depression can actually start to deepen. A lot of addiction lives here also, because numbing becomes the shortcut to silence what you refuse to face. You drink so you can say, I'm fine, without cracking. You binge, you scroll, or gamble so nobody sees the storm underneath. But suppression plus numbing doesn't heal the wound. It just buries the infection deeper. That's why the I'm fine identity eventually caves in. Every day you burn energy keeping the truth down, you get closer to collapse. Then there's good old sabotage. Yourself knows you're capable. You've got talent, determination, and potential. But your identity? It says, I'm broken. I'll never make it. So every time you start the race, you trip yourself up before the starter's horn sounds. You procrastinate, you binge, you quit before you get even closer. And the science matches the story here as well. When you live with negative identity, your prefrontal cortex and reward circuits literally go dark. You don't get the dopamine spark that drives motivation. You flatline before you even begin. That's what happens when identity is built on guilt and shame. You're not just fighting uphill, you're sabotaging your own climb. And then there's grief. Maybe the rawest gap of them all. Grief is your brain running two realities at once. The default mode network, your background operating system, still holds a person as being alive. Their voice, their laugh, their role in your story. That's why you still reach for the phone to text them or expect them to walk through the door like I said earlier. But your task brain knows the reality. They're not here any longer. Bills still come in. Kids still need to be fed. And the world keeps moving. One part of you is still with them. The other knows they're gone. And the DMN doesn't rationalize loss quickly. Not as rapidly, at least, as your task brain because it's in the present. The DMN clings to the old model, the old story where they're still with us. That's why you feel like you're living in two worlds, one inside, one outside, because in many ways you are. Grief researchers call this dual process model. You swing between loss-oriented processing, the memories, the pain, and restoration-oriented processing, trying to live life without them. And when that swing works, you adapt. But when it doesn't, you get stuck. Prolonged grief and months or years of exhaustion because the two realities never reconcile with each other. That's why grief feels like war. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is literally split between two worlds, and every day it fights to keep both running. Before we move on, let's pause and pull this into your own life. As I go through the steps, hit pause if you have to. I know, And I've been told I go a bit fast through these exercises. So, get your phone where you can reach it and wake up the screen. After each step, hit pause and work through that step one at a time. You can also access the written version of this over on a place called Substack. Look for The Architect of Self, and you'll find each week spelled out in writings. Make sure you subscribe so you can easily get over there to do and see the work in front of you. Now let's begin. Get that pause button ready. What I want you to do is write down 2 lists. On one side, who you are when no one's watching. On the other, who you are when people are around. Don't edit it, just write the honest truth. Okay, pause. Okay, now circle the places where they don't match, where the self feels tired, but the performance stays strong, where the self is grieving, but the identity says, I'm fine, where the self knows you're capable, but the story stays broken. Pause again. Next, pick one of those circles, just one circle. Ask yourself, how do I usually cover this gap? Do I suppress it? Sedate it with a drink, a scroll, a purchase, a binge? Or do you just keep running the mask and hope no one notices? Pause and name it. No editing. Then press play again. Now imagine living one day without the cover you just named. No sedation, no suppression, no mask. Just holding that gap in the light for 24 hours. What do you think that would feel like? Painful? Exposed? Freeing? Vulnerable? Pause again and let yourself actually picture it before moving on. Okay, we're back. That's your work, because until you name the gap and face it, it continues to own you. But once you pull it into the open, even one part of it, you slowly start taking your power back. This is your challenge this week. Pick one circle from your list, and instead of covering up, confront it, name it, feel it. Then tell one person your truth, your gap, and your goal, and of not covering it up. Or if you don't want someone knowing, then sit with it, raw, unfiltered, without numbing. That's the first step in closing the gap. And I promise you, it's going to be tough. Your mind's going to try to give you a ton of reasons why you shouldn't do it. Find the energy and the willpower not to listen to your mind. Do something different this time to get a different result. The reality is, the gap isn't going to close by itself. You can suppress it all you want, sedate it, sabotage it, or grieve inside endlessly. But unless you build a bridge between the self and your identity, you are going to keep living split in half, one foot in each world. So what's this bridge? It's like getting your car aligned because the tires are wearing faster on one side. It's just about you and not your tires. The self is the raw signal, your private thoughts, your inner world, your scars, and your standards. Identity is the story you write and the performance you sell to everyone watching. The bridge is when the two match or closely align, which reduces our internal conflict and starts to allow that switch I mentioned earlier to actually do its job. We are trying to get the who you are in the dark, alone, closer to the person you live in the light when other people are around. Neuroscience calls this bridge regulation. Do you remember the triple network model we talked about earlier? The default mode network, your brain's background operating system, the central executive network, which is your task brain, and the salience network, that switch I talked about. When you live out of alignment, that switchboard keeps shorting out, like the tires wearing out on your car too fast. The difference between you and your car, though, is you are stuck with both of your systems running at once, ruminating, buzzing in the background, and your performance straining in the foreground. That's why you're so exhausted all the time. It could be why you're irritable and short-fused, too. The bridge is built when you learn to retrain your switchboard. Not through sedation, not through numbing, but through ownership. When you name your truth and then act on it, the task brain starts syncing with the self instead of fighting it. The DMN stops recycling the old story and begins updating it. The salience network finally starts doing its job, flipping you cleanly between reflection and action instead of locking you in an endless tug of war between both worlds. That's alignment happening in your brain bucket, which means to you, less wasted energy, fewer inner battles, more capacity to live instead of just survive, more patience, less irritable, a longer fuse. That then has a cascading effect on making your sleep better, your health better, and your relationships better. Let's walk through how you start building the bridge. It's simple, but it's not easy. Again, when and where you need to, pause. Wake your phone screens up and get that finger ready to hit it. All right, here we go. Step 1. Name the fracture. From the reflection you did earlier, pick one place where self and identity don't match. Don't try to fix everything at once, because that's a bad idea and it won't work. Just simply pick one. Pause. Step 2. Take a behavior. Not a thought, not a prayer, not hope, not another positive affirmation journal entry, but a real behavior and action. Something you do today that pulls your private self and your public identity closer together. You're going to feel vulnerable, but push through it. It's worth it. If your self knows you're compassionate, but your identity hides behind cynicism, make one move of compassion in public. Nobody needs to notice. Just perform the action. It isn't about them. It's about you knowing you're doing it. If your self feels disciplined, but your identity collapses at night, keep one small promise to yourself before bed. Pause. Step 3. Repeat it until it sticks. Behavior is what rewires the brain, not belief, not talk, not hashtags or even mantras. Every time you repeat a behavior that matches your truth, you strengthen the bridge. Every rep is another board laid down, another nail driven in, another section of the gap closed. Society has you believing you have to have the belief before you can perform the action. I'll tell you, perform the action and the belief will always catch up. And that is how identity starts to stabilize. That's how anxiety, depression, and yes, even grief start to loosen their grip on you. It's because you're no longer burning energy managing two versions of yourself. You are starting to live one version of you, not two. In my opinion, this is where therapy can often stall, with talk, with over-validating, with endless circling around how you feel. But talk doesn't close the gap sometimes. Ownership always does. That's the line in the sand here. No excuses, no borrowed identities, no more waiting for permission. The bridge is there if you're willing to build it, one truth at a time, one behavior at a time, until the person in the mirror finally matches the story you're living out loud. When you've finished one alignment, go back and pick another to align. And as you go through the bridge building process, you won't need numbing. You won't need performance. You won't need to hide any longer, having no energy and being in conflict. You will know exactly who you are, whether the lights are on or off, whether you're around people or alone pushing through a workout. That's identity. That's self. That's alignment. That's the bridge. And you only have to be honest with yourself to make all of this work so well. I will leave you with one lasting challenge, an action and a behavior. So here's your challenge. Pick one fracture you circled earlier, one place where your self and identity don't match. And as you move through your day today, think about it and take one action that aligns the two. Just one. If your self says you're disciplined but your identity quits on hard days, finish the workout, even if it's half-assed. If your self says you're honest but your identity hides behind I'm fine, tell one person the actual truth. If your self says you're compassionate but your identity stays guarded, show one person kindness with no strings. One action, one behavior, one step. That's the first plank laid across the gap. Commit to it, and then just do it. Don't overthink it, because the bridge doesn't get built tomorrow. It can start now. Anxiety isn't random. Neither is depression, grief, or addiction. They're simply signals that the gap between yourself and your identity is wide open, and it's tearing you in two. That's why this podcast exists. It's not to hand you a shit ton of coping skills, over-validate you, or soft-talk you. But it's to strip the mask, confront the fracture, and force the real question. Who are you when no one's watching? So here's what to do next. Don't just listen and nod. Take today's challenge and live it. Lay one plank across the gap. Alignment doesn't happen by accident. It happens by action. Your action only. If this episode hit you, share it. Let's get the word out and keep this movement growing. Sharing helps me expand the reach of this work. And it might be your share that lands in front of someone who needed to hear this message. Someone who's been waiting for a voice to call to them and give them a way forward. If you want to find out more about me and what I offer, from speaking, identity interventions, organizational leadership training, learning modules to the many theories I'm developing for future research, visit carlhgregory.com. You can also message me there directly through the site or DM me on Instagram at carlhgregory. Again, if you want the written version of this to print, head over to Substack, where all of my blog mirrors these podcasts. It's the same raw message in longer form, so you can listen, read, and work the material into your own daily fight. And remember this, you are not your titles, you are not your labels, you are not your props. You are what you do when no one is watching. Thanks for listening to The Architect of Self. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, share, and come back for the next round. Now go live aligned and stay in the fight.